Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Age of Disruption. If you are in this room, you probably know the forces even better than I do. There's an increasing focus on employability and affordability. There's constant tension between quality and survival, between competency-based education and what we traditionally think of as a more well-rounded or liberal arts education. So we're going to talk a bit about the forces of competition this morning and do a bit of future casting into what the university of the future might look like. And hopefully everyone will get a takeaway that you can take back to your campuses. So Ryan, let's start with you. You're sort of at the forefront of this competition. Your new book is coming out, I guess, later this year, is Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College, which may strike some terror in the hearts of some of our audience members. So tell us what that looks like. What's the landscape?
Sure. So we're fortunate at University Ventures. We sort of sit at the intersection of what we call sort of the talent market. So everyone here, I think, is pretty much on the talent supply side. But the talent demand side is a part that requires some attention and frankly is too often overlooked by many colleges and universities. And so to take a look at sort of what's changed over the last decade or so in the talent market, I want to start with the demand side. And the fact is that the hiring process, how employers hire, has changed drastically over the last decade. Virtually all job descriptions are now online. Each posted job generates 150 to 250 applications. That's too many for any single hiring manager to review. So most employers now have resorted to using applicant tracking systems as filters, and those are based on keyword filters. And so if applicants literally do not have in their resumes or CVs the keywords that are in those job descriptions, they will be invisible to human hiring managers. Couple that to the fact that over the last decade, technical skills now outnumber cognitive and non-cognitive skills in job descriptions, particularly for entry-level jobs across almost all industries. And now some of that is surely due to the fact that it's a lot easier to come up with 10 different technical skills for a given job than it is to come up with 10 different ways of saying critical thinking or problem solving. But be that as it may,
what are the kind of technical skills you're talking about?
You know, it's not coding. Coding is certainly growing, but it's knowing how to use software. So Salesforce, Workday, SaaS platforms, many entry-level jobs now are mediated by SaaS platforms. And if these new college graduates don't have that, and the reality is that most of our institutions don't teach that, and why would we? Then those graduates will be at a disadvantage. So that's a big challenge, and lots of employers now have, in many ways, given up on looking for entry-level candidates for these positions. They now have, this has been documented, that if you map jobs on a matrix of those that require a degree, those that don't require a degree, and those that require experience, those that don't require experience, those that require a degree but no experience, that quadrant is emptied out over the last decade. We call it the empty quadrant. And it's unfortunate, but it's a function of the fact that many employers now have given up on the notion that they're going to find new college graduates with the technical skills that they require. So they just simply put an experience proxy on there. So that's a challenge. So the result has been, and again, I'm sitting up here on the stage with two leaders in innovation whose institutions are at the leading edge of this. So I don't think this is true of ASU or Boise State. But by and large, we have, over the last decade, record levels of underemployment for college graduates. And the well-documented failure to launch, which coupled with record student loan debt, has had spillover effects in terms of areas like home buying, in terms of new business creation. So that's on the talent demand side. Now on the talent supply side, the biggest change over the last decade has been the fact that, a decade ago, if you'd surveyed matriculating students as to why they were pursuing a degree, you'd get lots of different answers. About half of them would say it was related to job or income or career. Today, it's 92%. So you have now a generation of practical, hard-headed students who are really very focused on that first job and no longer buy that sort of tried and true higher education line that we prepare you for your fifth job, not for your first job. They know that if they don't get a good first job, they're much less likely to get a good fifth job.
Right. So you've been responding to this, Gordon, at Boise State. Tell us, you've created this completely innovative new model. Tell us what it looks like, the College of Innovation and Design.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an institution, I think we certainly subscribe to a lot of the trends that Ryan's talking about. I think there's two that we think a lot about that I think Ryan's written about. Michael, you talk about affordability and the influence of technology on what sort of substitutes, complementarities can be brought alongside universities or in competition. And to Ryan's point, I think Boise State as a university has very much taken that with reverence and said, what do we need to be doing to create mechanisms that drive change that can allow us to adapt? One of our issues as traditional universities, I would say, is the pace with which we innovate, and often the substantial nature of the change we drive in our traditional, more discipline-based colleges. You end up with what I would call maybe singles or doubles, rather than really trying to reach and address these issues of employability, knowledge conveyance, and how do we marry the two? How do we educate and train, perhaps? So the College of Innovation and Design is unique in that it's a diploma-granting college created by our president, Bob Custer, former lieutenant governor of Illinois, very innovative guy, but very much focused on where do we use the same structure that has the autonomy and decision-making of a college to create new majors, accelerate the pace with which we launch those, and take on these issues that really require a university-wide solution. They're not, my College of Business, invariably, the kinds of stuff that you'll see out of various disciplines is you'll see things like marketing and supply chain will get together and say, why don't we offer a joint degree? That's what I mean by those singles and doubles. Whereas how are you going to address the idea that as an institution, do we embrace the coexistence of knowledge conveyance and the idea that we as institutions share some ownership in the outcome of our graduates?
So you
some
even
of the
have
things,
pop-up majors, right?
so yeah,
tell us about some of the
well,
new
there's things we've done that I would call out. One is speed to market. We have a faculty member who does a great work around augmented and virtual reality. In 8 months, we put that out, and now it's going to be a top 15 major. So our own responsiveness as institutions, just to the trends themselves, can be one pathway to actually addressing those needs. You need a talent on campus or in your circle of influence. We look at direct issuance of certificates. That's an area we're also looking at, to think of stackable degrees. Where do you generate more currency rather than the 4-year degree itself? But also really owning our local market with things where we've worked with some of our largest employers, taking, instead of students who work, where are employees who learn? And generating the idea that all of those are our students, and how do we go into our employers? Not everybody, I think this is language, Michael, you've used, has the luxury of the life stage or the ability to step on campus. How do we take our university there? So we've built the beginnings of a university for one of our largest employers that's really white labeled, or it's Boise State backbone, but it's labeled the employer's university. And that's various snapshots. There's a lot more we do. We run as a venture capital almost model. It's a weird term to use in higher ed, but we make bets on these themes, whether it's faculty working cross-disciplinary, what are we doing about economic development, what are we doing about the influence of technology, and we make bets on those, nurture them, and then I export them out of my college to my peers as serving as a catalyst to constantly trying to drive that pace. I'm not aware of any other university that does that with a diploma-granting college, but that is how our model works in a nutshell.
And I imagine, I think this is something that Michael has a lot of experience with, I imagine this requires people on campus, the faculty, to think much differently about interacting with each other and how they're going to create these new models. So you've talked a lot, Michael, about sort of bureaucratic intransigence and the reluctance people have on campus to thinking in these new models. So tell us your experience and just what you've learned about getting people to go along or to think in this new way.
I think the key to all of this, I like Ryan's terminology of talent demand and talent supply, is to, in a sense, take the faculty mindset, which is built around knowledge, and find a way, at least in some institutions, to engage that faculty energy, faculty creativity, faculty drive, faculty ambition around the success of the student as the objective function of the institution. And so, as opposed to the success of the faculty. Right. Each of us can worry about our own success as a faculty member, and the institutions can help faculty members to be successful in what they do, but the purpose of the institution is not the success of the faculty. The purpose of the institution is the success of the students. And so after a couple of years debate about that, or discussion, argument, whatever, at our institution, we began to find ways to empower the faculty to be designers of their own fate rather than inheritors of a bureaucratic model of the past, derivative of simple replication of other institutions, enabling them to be empowered in ways in which they could now start focusing on this notion of student success. And then in that, once the faculty were freed from just replicating previous models, they then could be unbelievably powerfully creative. And so for us, the debate was one of not wanting to go down the path of the normal argument. The faculty battling the administration about change and dealing with this or dealing with that or moving this way. All of those arguments have the same outcome. They have negative outcomes for the students. So in our particular case, back to using Ryan's terminology, we are after the enablement and the empowerment of the talent in all of our students. Our student body is completely representative of the socioeconomic diversity of our region, which is very difficult to achieve in and of itself. How do you take all that talent, all that ambition, all that energy, and drive it forward? So the second you get a purpose for the faculty which is beyond their own individual, and I don't use the word negatively, their own individual selfish purpose. I was a faculty member, regular faculty member for many years. Once you get beyond that, then the spirit of creativity and dynamic engagement can work. I will say that I think this notion of the rate of change is really the driver of the kinds of things that Ryan is talking about and the kinds of things that Gordon is focusing on at Boise State, and that is that if your institution and your faculty are rigid or fixed, that's fine, but then you may not be as successful in sort of keeping up with the socio-technical, socio-cultural, socioeconomic rates of change. And so the other thing that we've done, and I think this has been accepted by the faculty at our institution, is that we've created ourselves as what we call a complex adaptive knowledge enterprise. We accept complexity and speed as facts of life. We do not resist it. Adaptive, we are willing to make changes, not away from our core values, not away from the core values of the academy, but we're willing to be adaptive to things. Knowledge, that's what we do, that's what we produce, that's what's at our core. And then enterprise, the last word, is we do not operate as an agency of the government. We serve the people through investments from the government. And this is an important distinction, particularly for the public universities, most of whom operate as agencies of the government in what I view as a failed model.
Right. Gordon, I think it was you who said universities are places where everybody's empowered to say no and very few are empowered to say yes. So it seems like part of what we're talking about is getting people to feel like...
Well, you know the joke. The faculty senate voted matter fails.
Right, exactly. So how do you, were there moments where you felt like jump in, but Gordon or Michael, where you felt like that the faculty kind of got this message, and is it about giving them the power to say yes?
It is about giving them, it's about enabling them to be intellectual designers, to take their unbelievable talent, their unbelievable energy, and to force them out of the model of being simple bureaucrats, following simple, constrained bureaucratic models, and empowering them to move forward to every extent possible.
Right.
And the piece that I would add to that, though, I think it's so important, and I think it's embedded in what you're saying, Michael, I think it's at Boise State is, and in this audience as well, to what extent do you control or build a narrative that supports the kind of culture that can allow that to happen? Boise State, we talk about being a university on the move. It's common terminology. We talk about we're not so in love with our past that we're not willing to re-embrace a future that's going to be different. You talk about the terminology that you've said. Our proof points are, it starts with a blue football field for anybody who follows college athletics.
Very weird.
In fact, this paper wrote about a year ago about...
but no one ever won on that thing except you guys.
Well, that's because we get used to it.
This is what students are looking for.
But, I would just say that when you have those kinds of cultural icons on campus, you can start to prove to people we're different. And as an aside, we own Blue Turf, so if you actually want one, you have to come to our university. But think about, I would argue, any of the leaders in this room, what is the narrative you start to tell in your university if you are interested in trying to change that, get that faculty engagement going? There are mechanisms we may each be talking about. In my case, this model where we bet on faculty who want to get out of their silos, get working across. How do we back those folks and make those folks celebrated? I have a department chair of anthropology who's said, I wanted to adapt the techniques of anthropology and apply it to a professional world. 2-year observations of people is not going to work in a professional world. Let's go forward with a certificate. I love that because I can't tell you how many more humanities-oriented faculty I've talked to who lament that society doesn't recognize the value of English, history. And I've heard it so many times, I've finally said, A, I agree with you, but B, what is it that you're doing to perhaps consider amplifying the very things you're talking about in your curriculum, rather than waiting for society to come and recognize the great work you're doing. So these mechanisms can, I think, also work with a narrative.
But that was also something you mentioned, I think, when we talked earlier about that some faculty are sort of waiting for you to come recognize them, and you have to encourage them to come out and offer new programs that they want to do, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you need to work with the talent you have, although in other cases, I think we have to get in a model where we don't mimic. This is an industry that loves to mimic itself, and we build we do it all ourselves, and to the extent we're willing to reach outside. I'm the only campus that I'm aware of in the nation where we partner with HBX on their credential of readiness. Yeah. We transcript that credit on Boise State, and we charge just the credit hours that a student takes. There's no incremental fees or anything else. They work in that global community. They're learning basic accounting, finance, and they get that credential from Harvard. But absolutely, there's a cultural narrative on our campus that says, why are you having accounting taught by Harvard? You know, I'm worried that's dilution, and that's actually a real term that was on our campus. And I said, I'm not trying to crack a joke, but I think Harvard will work with us. You know, it's not hard, but there's that sense of reverence, and we have to respect that. But you work with the coalition of the willing, and you build from there. And I think there's enough on our campuses to start from.
Right. So Ryan, tell us a little bit more about, you talk about last mile skills. What are the skills that you think universities are not addressing, and some of the businesses that you're investing in that sort of tell us something about where universities might go, where they might partner with private industry?
Sure. So specifically addressing this imbalance in sort of talent supply, talent demand. We've come up with this concept of last mile training, the technical training on SaaS platforms or whatever it might be, to address that imbalance. And there are a bunch of different models that we're seeing out there. These are for-profit companies that are partnering with universities, and they're partnering with those that are willing to do it. And ASU and Boise State are certainly two of them. But here are the models that we see. So there are student pay models, or boot camp type models, where the student will literally pay tuition, very much similar to the post-secondary education model.
And these are students who are on campuses now who are looking for extra, or they've graduated? And
it can vary. It can be students. There are boot camps that are now student pay boot camps that are aligned to or on campus, and there are ones that are adjacent. And recent graduates will pay for a 12-week or 6-month program post graduation. So that's one model. The second one is one we call the income share agreement model, where there's no tuition up front. And the program, the last mile training program, will take a percentage of students' income over time. And then the third is a model that a company that we both Boise State and Arizona State partner with, which is a staffing model, which is really interesting, where they run a program on campus, and it's free to the student. And if the student completes the training, there's no cost to the student, but they're guaranteed a job at the end of it. And the company Reviture makes its money on the back end because they hire the student and then staff them out for a 2-year stint. So it's sort of a ROTC-like model. Students commit in return for receiving the training to go work where the work is, and they relocate for that work for 2 years. So it's a pathway not just to a good first job in the sector, but also a second job, because they're going to get hired by that end client at the end of the day. So we're very interested in models that are helping to establish new pathways for students. If you think about where pathways exist, clear pathways, most of them exist for what I will call old economy jobs. So if you want to be a lawyer, you want to be an accountant, you want to be an investment banker, maybe even a journalist, you sort of don't do that.
Not that.
You sort of know what pathway to go. But what if you want to work in biotech? What if you want to go, code, for example, or even in healthcare? Where are those pathways? We're sort of equipping our students to, check the boxes. They're millennials and now Generation Z are very good at sort of checking boxes and following the way, but they graduate and they're at a loss, and particularly complicated by the sort of talent demand, the changes on the demand side.
So and I want to hear from all of you, is this the competition, or are you working with universities?
So it's not the competition by any means at all. I mean, our objective is the successful transition of our students to happy and successful lives. And so why would we limit our students' access to anything that helps them to be able to do that? So we will partner with, we have over 170 technology and service-oriented partners already integrated into our environment from the private sector. And with each of those partners, whatever they happen to be, they're helping our students to become more adaptable while we're still teaching philosophy and computer science and all the things that we do and all the things that our faculty does. We're intensifying that. What we're trying to do, and one of the things that we've done is we've integrated a fair amount of technology not only into our online programs but onto our on-campus programs. We've changed the nature of what a semester is, the time, the academic clock, the speed, the decision making, the way in which people can engage, because we want our students to be able to do whatever they want to do. So we're offering them every tool, every mechanism. If they want to learn how to code, there's coding
What are
courses.
so give us an example of some of those things you brought on, the 170, I think you said.
Well, so there's technology companies that are focused on adaptive learning platforms that allow students to master math in ways in which they won't have to struggle slowing up their progress through the university. We've got learning assessment tools that we've integrated. We've got ways for students to gather together and meet and assemble and visually engage with each other. We've got learning tools, assessment tools, engagement tools, training tools, preparing for graduate school tools, all integrated into a platform. We've got online, interactive, adaptive-based advising systems, everything that you can possibly imagine, drawn from wherever, we build it ourselves if no one has it. If someone has it, we buy it, we partner, we link, we venture, we come together, all driven by the objective of how do we produce out of our institution master learners capable of learning anything, capable of adapting to anything that they might encounter. I want to say something about this last mile. I think the military has done a fantastic job at this. So if the Marines want an F-35 pilot of the new high-tech jet fighter bomber that we put together, first you graduate from college. In whatever discipline, it makes no difference. Second, you go to officers candidate school. If you're worthy, you move to the basic school. You spend 6 months learning to be a platoon leader in the Marines, because that's a cultural thing, regardless of your job, lawyer, pilot, whatever. Then you go to Pensacola, Florida, and you learn to become a pilot. Then you learn to become a jet pilot, and a year and a half or so after you graduate from college, you're flying F-35s in an active squadron in the fleet. That's last mile training. We need to make certain that whatever career path someone's on, it's all integratable and connectable and so forth, but we still have to produce fantastic college graduates.
So Gordon, you have your school or your college, you limit the amount of time that these majors have, right? You're cycling through these, like it's 2 years, I think you said to me no longer than 10 years. So how does it change? What's the goal? Is the goal to change is the goal to sort of make yourself irrelevant because the entire university will start to look like this and be more innovative, or do you think this?
Yeah, I think you're calling out sort of this model that I've mentioned, which is this idea that if this kind of a structure, a diploma granting college structure, can nurture the value, I would argue, we're serving. And again, just to go up 1 minute, I'm going to go up a level. This is a mechanism if you want to focus on change from closer to the center of your organization. Many people will say, let's do it on the margin. Let's go start it over here, and that way nothing has to change, and maybe it'll grow up and kind of, there's a lot of reasons some people do that, others don't. I think in this mechanism, if you're attempting to try to catalyze change from inside, one I'm more a fan of, that model, obviously, then you're nurturing and you're trying to export, so that I have the capacity to take on the next experiments. But it's absolutely designed to change and accelerate. It doesn't say that other colleges aren't doing great things too. My colleagues are doing wonderful things. But it is a mechanism that I think is focused on accelerating. It also serves a second purpose I don't speak a lot in the front of the microphone on, which is it saves the university, I think, precious resources, because we're great at universities at launching things, and we end up with these zombie programs. We have a program I won't mention for obvious reasons. It takes $2 million a year, 9 years, it's produced 6 graduates. $18 million on an annual budget of $350 million. That's resources that could absolutely be rejuvenating other faculty, and yet we're so reticent in our industry to think about how we retire those things.
And I'm sure people in the audience.
So we save that by, it never gets out of our shop if it's not going to be viable.
I want to move to questions in just a moment. I think Adam's are you going to start that? Or sorry,
Yeah.
We're running a little late, so I'm.
So questions from the audience? My phone is blowing up. I've got lots of anonymous. Oh, in the front. And please identify yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Morris, and I'm provost at Boston University. One of the issues we haven't touched on is the role of U.S. universities creating campuses or outposts globally. Can you talk about how you see the risks and rewards of putting on-the-ground outposts around the globe?
So we have offices in Ho Chi Minh City, in Vietnam, in Dubai, in Moscow, in China, in other places of Europe, in Islamabad, Pakistan, and a range of other places. And the reason that we're doing those things is because we found people who are interested in solving the same problems that we're interested in solving. And so in our case, we're not starting up outposts or campuses. We're partnering. And so that doesn't mean that starting those up is wrong. I mean, the demand for educational services and educational outcomes is insatiable and will be insatiable going forward for as far into the future as anyone can see, because as we modernize our economy, our cultures, our trade relationships, notwithstanding things going on to the south of this city, the opportunities for educational attainment and educational engagement are virtually unlimited. So we're not against it. We just don't start campuses. We start projects and then run those projects from those sites.
Great. We are getting a number of questions from the audience around faculty and how do you engage them more and be willing to participate in, throwing out their own curriculum and doing new innovative things. Can you offer them incentives of some kind or another?
Yeah, Gordon, you talked about
Yeah,
that.
I mean, one of the things we do, I think, again, I'm a unit, 23,000 students, a very young university, relatively young. So there's a hunger among some of our faculty, not everybody, of course. One of the things we do is we convene annually. We do exercises where we invite them, very low stakes, but let's imagine a Boise State in 2030, 2040. Come join us in what that exploration might look like. It's low stakes, it's not getting partisan. Ultimately, that rolls up to an annual RFP process from faculty. We had 48 submissions for faculty proposing things that went beyond the disciplinary boundaries in which they were tied and the colleges they were tied to. There's, I think, a hunger among faculty. If what we need to think of is universities, how are we stewards of that, right? I have very limited resources. I can back maybe 1 or 2 faculty in our university, maybe 3 a year tops, in order to fund that growth.
So 3 out of 48.
So, say again?
3 out of 48 of those RFPs?
Correct. Wow. But then the question is, how do you create ways we engage? We do everything from weekly coffee conversations. This feels very tactical, but it's about relationships and ultimately having the university and folks see that there are, from everything from weekly coffees to being sponsored, we try to create lots of doors and relationships that we can have with those faculty. That's one mechanism.
Yeah.
So I think what I would add is that we've done a terrible job. We've in some ways ruined the professoriate in the United States, bureaucratized institutions for which they have very few degrees of freedom to design their own intellectual trajectories. And so the technique that we have used is to free the faculty to draw from their unbelievable talent. Faculty members are whip smart. They're unbelievably capable. They've devoted decades of their life to be able to do what they're doing. They're masters of their subject. They have passion and drive and energy around the things that they do. And we've forced them into these simpleton bureaucracies and in some ways ruined them. And so what we've done is we back up and say, let's start designing the future. So we don't have an anthropology department. We did away with anthropology as a department. We created a new school for human evolution and social change. And the faculty, with some argument and debate and so forth, eventually became masters of the design of new degrees and curricula and new ways of engaging and so forth. So the way to engage the faculty is to empower the faculty to be successful, and at least in our case, 75,000 students on campus, 25,000 students online, 3,400 faculty members. We're seeing levels of productivity and creativity and outcomes that we've never realized before in the entire history of our institution, because our faculty are freed from the bureaucracies in which they're trapped. And I don't mean administrative bureaucracies. I mean academic bureaucracies.
So it's including them in the conversation to a large degree.
Yes.
Adam, one more?
We have time for one last quick question for Michael. Do you think that what you do at ASU is replicable at smaller private institutions?
Well, I definitely think that what we do at ASU is replicable because ASU is an amalgamation of a whole series of different types of institutions inside ASU. We're running an 8,000 student honors college, which has a complete unique set of interactions between our honors faculty and the rest of our faculty. We're running a journalism school of 1,400 students that has a certain dimensionality and character to it. So it's not, ASU just appears big because it's everything all aggregated together. We've got 400 degree programs and 150 academic units, each one of which is different, each one of which is evolving within the same space. So I'll even use my own experience as a trustee of Bowdoin College for many years, a small, very successful four-year college in Brunswick, Maine. There's nothing that we're doing in the ways that we're approaching things at ASU that wouldn't work at Bowdoin also.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Kate, back to you.
Great. Thank you all for coming this morning.